We are really happy because a number of IEEE organizations are supporting this event, including the Aerospace and Engineering Society, Computer and Instrumentation and Communications.
We have a special treat today. So we have Sanjit, who came all the way from Texas today. He's currently in a doctoral program in the Weinberg Theory Group at the University of Texas at Austin. He's originally from New Jersey, graduated from the University of Chicago, and he majored in mathematics. His current research under Professor Elena Carceres is focused on multi-boundary black holes in so-called warped space-time. So please give like a warm welcome to Sanjit.
Thank you, Sean, for the introduction, and thank you all for having me here today. I'll be talking about quantum information in black holes, as per the title. This has kind of been the hot subject of interest in my field lately, so that you all come away learning something about my field. So, before I get into the details, however, let me start by at least motivating what exactly my field is all about. So, my field, which is called holography, is an aspect of what's known as quantum gravity. Well, what's quantum gravity? So, in order to explain quantum gravity, first I need to explain a little bit about how exactly physicists think about physics so far. So, there are four fundamental forces that we know of in our pursuit of physics, and three of those are explained by what are called quantum field theories. Quantum field theories are basically just theories that can describe physics on, say, atomic length scales. So that's where forces like electromagnetism, the weak nuclear force, and the strong nuclear force are really at play. Gravity isn't so much of a quantum phenomenon at those scales. So gravity isn't really well described by those sorts of theories as well. Gravity requires its own kind of special framework because in part it's different, it's very weak compared to the rest of those forces. Quantum field theories aren't well suited to studying gravity. That's what general relativity does. However, general relativity only really tells us about gravity in what's called a classical sense, which just means that we don't understand entirely how quantum effects play a role in gravity. So gravity does play a role, can be said to play a role at those atomic length scales, but there aren't really quantum phenomenon entangled with gravity at those scales. So what quantum gravity seeks to do is understanding physics at even smaller length scales, where quantum effects do play a role in our understanding of gravity. So when I say small, I mean what's called the Planck length, which is 10 to the minus 35 meters, which is very difficult to imagine, I know. But think about that as essentially being sort of a resolution of the universe in a way. So if we want to understand how gravity works at those sorts of lengths, we need to have a better understanding of how quantum effects intertangle with gravity. And so there are theories of quantum gravity that exist. For example, that's what string theory purports to do. String theory is supposed to be a theory of quantum gravity. We do have these sorts of theories, and they are kind of a very strong subject of interest in high energy theoretical physics right now. My field is called holography, and it's rooted around what's called the holographic principle. So back in the early 90s, Gerard Tooft and Charles Thorne were kind of formulating the basic ideas of this, but Leonard Susskind is the one who really brought it all together. So basically what it tells you is that if you have some theory of quantum gravity defined in some number of dimensions, say d dimensions, and I'm including time as a dimension, then that can be encoded on a lower number of dimensions, specifically on one fewer dimensions. Think about it as kind of a hologram in a way, and that's why it's called the holographic principle. So a hologram in a way takes a two-dimensional image and turns it into a three-dimensional image, and all of the information of that three-dimensional image is contained on your two-dimensional, from being just a vacuum state to something. So that indicates that to us that black holes need to be related to quantum states in the boundary theory somehow. There's something there. That's not quite an explicit entry into the dictionary, but there's something there. Now, that kind of gives rise to ER equals EPR. To explain what those letters mean, first, ER, or Einstein-Rosen, or Einstein-Rosen Bridges, are just wormholes. They are structures that connect different points in space. And basically, the basic example for constructing a wormhole is you take a black hole, you send a photon or something through it, and you see where it goes. And when you do that, which is called geodesically completing the space, you basically see that it'll come out at some other end. In the basic example of Schwarzschild, which is the sort of black holes that's the sort of thing that we use to model black holes in reality, that's actually what gives rise to white holes. So you can construct wormholes in this way. Now, EPR, or the Einstein-Rosen paradox, tells you that entanglement breaks what we know about relativity. So special relativity and general relativity both tell us that, or one of the tenets of those theories is that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. You just can't do it. It's a fundamental speed cap on the universe. However, entanglement naively seems to imply that you can break that bound. If you have two electrons that are entangled already, and you separate them by some distance, and you measure one of them, the other one will also be measured immediately. But if they're far enough away from one another, that doesn't really make much sense. You would expect some sort of time delay, because you would have to expect that the measurement from the first electron sends a signal to the second electron, and that would have to not move faster than the speed of light. So it's weird that entanglement's even a concept. This was referred to in German as spooky action at a distance by Einstein in a letter to, I think, the Dirac or someone once. It's a weird concept. It's one of the things that Einstein really didn't like about quantum mechanics. One of the reasons why he thought it was wrong. Now, what ER equals EPR says, which that's something that Maldacena and Susskind came up with together in like, I don't know, 5 years ago or so. Basically, they came up with this idea that entanglement creates Einstein-Rosen bridges, and that Einstein-Rosen bridges allow for entanglement. So they're really two sides of the same coin. And the motivation for this was actually the explicit form of what's dual to a two-sided eternal wormhole. Two-sided eternal wormholes are known to be dual to an entangled state. So we know that entanglement and wormholes are somehow related to one another, and this was basically the statement that was trying to formulate that. ER equals EPR is interesting in that regard because it tells us that entanglement and wormholes are related. Third example, quantum complexity. So this is where the quantum information kind of enters in more clearly. So just a quick statement about what quantum complexity is. It's very similar to the classical computational example or definition of complexity. You start with some reference state, and you have some target state. And these are quantum states. So these aren't bits, these are qubits, or some superposition of bits. Now, given a reference state and a target state, we can turn that reference state into a target state by applying a bunch of reversible quantum operators. We call those quantum operators gates, and we call our collection of gates a circuit. As long as we get within a certain tolerance of our target state, we're good. A quantum circuit is just fine. And if we have that tolerance, then we have a finite set of gates that we can pull from. As you evolve the state through time, the complexity should increase linearly. The reason for that is because in quantum mechanics, it's a known fact that evolution over a single time unit will just consist of one gate. We can ask the question, what exactly is that linear growth dual to in a bulk theory? More generally, what is complexity dual to in bulk theory? And this has been a subject of research for the past 10 years or so, and it's still ongoing. It's still kind of an open question.
Thank you very much.